This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast. Adam Collins with you, Daniel Norcross with me. When I was going to the break there, I played out that audio. Just on Jimmy and the BBL, he wasn't named in the draft overnight by Cricket Australia, but he's got time on his side, doesn't he? If he really wants to play in Australia this summer, I'm sure there'll be a way. There'll be some door he can enter the country on to end up in one of those BBL sides. And just thought I'd get your take on that, given it drove so many people to our podcast last week.
Well, I mean, firstly, what I don't 100% understand is what his role is with England over the winter, because England, of course, play in Pakistan in early October. That wouldn't be an issue. That wouldn't get in the way of any leagues. But then he goes to New Zealand, if he does go to New Zealand as a mentor. And that series ends, I think I'm right in saying, like around about the 21st or 20th or so of December. So he would be in that neck of the woods if he was with England. And then he could pop over. Now, I don't even know if he's sort of lined up to go out with the team. But if he did, then that would be kind of irresistible, wouldn't it? Because the Big Bash that's sort of when it's kind of happening. And
that's its month, right? That's its time. End of December into January is when you want the eyeballs to be drawn towards your TV product, and he'll be a big part of that. I should have said, by the way, thank you to Felix and Greg, who've both been great pals of the Final Word over the years, for being so generous about us in that interview there. Look, I think it probably will happen in some capacity. It'll be too tempting for one of the teams, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Well, you'd be mad not to, wouldn't you? Because I mean, when you think about how much money is made from veterans tournaments, right?
Exactly.
People turn up to watch some pretty ropey cricketers, and it's always terribly disappointing. I remember going to a game, I think in 1979 or 80, when Old England played Old Australia. It may have been part, actually, of those 1980 celebrations at the Oval. And I saw Fred Truman bowling. And I think Dennis Compton played as well. And, of course, I was 11, and I was so excited. I've still got the programme here, the match day programme. And to me, I was going to go and watch these guys that were just names in a book, but a book that I'd read over and over and over and over again and was obsessed with. And, of course, the crushing disappointment of seeing them waddle in off 5 or 6 paces and turn their arm over, not hit the ball with any great tremendous power, not bowl at any great speed. Whereas Jimmy Anderson is a living veteran of 42. There's something kind of faintly fascinating about him. So getting him into, bring him out of retirement and sticking him in whippet thin with a point to prove. Because a lot of this is about Jimmy really deep down, I think, still being a bit pissed off that he's not playing, because he knows he can do it. I mean, he hasn't said this. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I reckon he'll be looking at the England Test team and thinking, I'm a better bowler than Matt Potts. No disrespect to Matt Potts, incidentally. I think he's a splendid bowler, but I bet he's looking at that in a way and going, I could do a job, surely. And so there's a bit of, wouldn't it be great if I could show these youngsters that I can still bowl knuckleballs and pace-offs and wide Yorkers and God knows what else? I think he'd love it. And I think he'd prefer to do that than play in the Veterans Leagues, which he could walk into, and they pay quite decent money. But, like the one that took place in Birmingham, which had an India-Pakistan final, didn't it? I think.
Yeah, I just can't see. I just can't. I spoke to a former England player about this who just said, I can't subject myself to this.
No.
I mean, because that, look, I'm not going to say the obvious thing that we all think, but, it's this riddled with that perception, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And I don't think Jimmy would need to reduce himself to, and I'm not judging the players who do, by the way, because they pay good money, but there's a difference between being an international cricketer who is still trying to make money from playing the game in any way they can because they don't have the opportunity to be in the media or to coach or whatever, and guys who are still very much ensconced within the game. And Anderson will be for the next 40 years of his life if he wishes to. So, Daniel, I'm mindful we've got an absolutely packed agenda and we're not blessed with enormous amounts of time. So the next thing I want to do is tell you about Westfield London and Westfield Stratford City, who are indeed the partners in all of the programs we're making throughout this English summer. If you asked for a South African cricket fan what E, L and N stands for, they'd almost certainly tell you about fast bowlers Elworthy, Langveld and Ntini. Okay, this is an interesting start. If you asked a Russian historian, They probably tell you that it stands for 3 former leaders of Russia and the Soviet Union. This is fucking ridiculous. Where are we going? And if you ask Donald, I'm not even going to bother with some of the pronunciations there. Khrushchev is one of them. Brezhnev and Pretanova. Sorry, easier than I thought. And if you ask Donald Trump, he'd probably say ELN is the guy that owns X, the everything app. Oh, that's quite clever. I see what he's done here now. But at Westfield, London, ELN stands for Eat, Live and Nourish, describing itself as the world's most Instagrammable cafe. It's the place to go when you want your friends to briefly pause their doom scrolling and think, hey, they went to ELN. They say you eat with your eyes, but ELN, that's where you can eat your breakfast, your lunch and your dinner with your lens surrounded by neon signs, like the neon lights behind my hotel room here. Sort of purple light, whatever you want to call it. Fake plants on the walls and aesthetic colour tones. Westfield, London, food that looks good enough to eat. There you go. I've never heard of ELN. I'm glad I do now. As ever, a creative way into it by our pals at Westfield who write the copy that you love, Daniel. They're more extra and they're less ordinary, that's for sure.
I am in awe of the people who write this copy every time. It's very rare that I find myself just giggling hysterically at advertising copy, but he does it. He nails it every time. And I should say that I like breakfast, I like lunch, and I like dinner. So maybe it's time I went down to ELN.
Daniel, I mentioned briefly that the schedule's been released for the next 7 years in Australia. It's not just about what's going to happen in March 2027. There are lots of other bits and pieces here. Just to give you a sense of it, right? We've got confirmation of the obvious bits that Melbourne have the next 7 Boxing Day tests and Sydney have the next 7 New Year's test matches. They always make a big deal of this, like, the Boxing Day test to stay at the MCG, as if it's going anywhere else. Like, you occasionally see Perth pop up saying they want to host the Melbourne Test match, host the Boxing Day Test match. That's kind of like me saying, I wish I was Australia's off spinner. And given the way I'm bowling, I'd have a better claim than Perth have of hosting Boxing Day, that's for sure. But what Perth do get is the first test of the summer for the next 3 years, which is significant, because what that means is there's this added complication, Daniel, with Brisbane hosting the 2032 Olympics. No one has a fucking clue what's going to happen with Stadia there at the moment. It's complicated. It's political. I mean, Alan Border was in the media this week saying they should build a new stadium in Victoria Park there, 60,000 seats, and make it everything. And look, the clout that Alan Border has, maybe they will and maybe they should. But the Gabba, we know, will be there in its current form for 2 more summers. And that's, of course, including the Ashes test of 25-26. That's been made the day-night test as well, not Adelaide, which is a bit of a shift. The last 2 day-night test matches in Australia between England and Australia, of course, have been played at Adelaide Oval. It's been the home of the day-night test. Well, Adelaide now, what they get is the next 7 years is what's been called the Christmas test. That's new jargon. I've never heard of anything called the Christmas test before, but there you go. So the test immediately before Christmas will be in Adelaide for 7 years. Some will be day test matches, some will be day-night, which sounds good to me because the day test in Adelaide's a really good thing. You haven't been lucky enough to enjoy one of those yet, Daniel, but believe you me, when you cross that bridge at 7:30 and it's a day test, that's quite the opportunity to enjoy a city that's right on the edge of the ground. But they do have a day-nighter in Adelaide this year, which will be the India test match, which has already been announced. So that's the guts of it. It'll be Brisbane in number 2, not number 1, as it was for so many years. Perth have won that for 3 years. Adelaide goes 3rd, but before Christmas when there's 2 series, and then Melbourne and Sydney where they've been for the last 40-odd years. Well, in Melbourne's case, the last 45 years, I think it is now. And before that, most of the time as well, starting on Boxing Day, and Sydney keep a test match on about 3 or 4 January of the New Year period.
I've got to say, this makes complete sense to me, which is why I'm slightly baffled by it, because ordinarily things happen and they don't make any sense to me. And it makes sense to me for a whole bunch of reasons, but I might be wrong. So the first thing that makes sense to me is we are trying to just cut down a bit on travelling around an enormous continent. I love tournaments in Australia. I've done an Ashes there. I've done World Cup there. But my God, you do go back and forth across a very, very big landmass. So for teams to arrive in Perth, it seems like it's the nearest place to arrive, basically, unless you're New Zealand. And so there's a whole load of good things about that. And from a purely selfish point of view, it'll mean that, if you go over there, if you're English, you can take the direct flight to Perth and not stop somewhere else. It's 16 hours. Your jet lag isn't as bad because it's not as much. Everything about that kind of works. And then Brisbane being the day-night test is the most obvious thing in the world, and I'm going to explain to you why. Because Queensland is ridiculous. They don't do daylight savings, so it gets dark at 6:45, something to do with cows and curtains or something, I've been told. Whether that's apocryphal or not, I don't know, but it's dim-witted beyond belief. So you're in the height of summer, and it's dark by 7, which means that if there is rain during the day, then you're in danger of bad light. And also the day-night test should be played in a lot of night. That's kind of the fun of it. So if you're going to the place where it gets dark at 6:30, 7:15,
Yep.
then play the day-night game there. Don't play the day-night game in Adelaide, which is the most sensible city in Australia. I'm very sorry, people won't want to hear this, but they do have, strangely, a sensible time zone where it gets dark about 8:30, 8:45 that time of year. You know, it's like it's not quite English, but it's kind of English in that sense of having lengthy nights. So when you played day-night cricket in Adelaide, it was always, to me, a little weird because there was only sort of an hour and a quarter or so, or an hour and a half at most of the day, which was played in the darkness, right? So it was kind of like the wrong place to do day-night cricket, and Brisbane's the right place to do day-night cricket. So to me, and because of the way you travel, it's always going to be slightly imperfect, but you travel to Perth, and then presumably you travel to Adelaide, and
Well,
you travel to Brisbane.
It is going to be the
Adelaide,
longest trip in football, Perth to Brisbane, then back to Adelaide. It doesn't quite work the way you're describing on the, you're still going to rack up your frequent flyer miles, but still, flying to Perth
better,
first,
though, isn't
it? It's a little bit better. And look, I think the most important thing is it's being done in a long-term, strategic, joined-up thinking way with the broadcasters. Everyone knows what's going on. There's no ambiguity around it. This is the way it's going to be, right? So I think that's the best part of all of this. I know Nick Hockley was big on this when he spoke to Jeff and me at Sydney earlier this year, being keen to get this arrangement in place, and so he has. Just with an eye to those Border Gavaskar Test matches later in 2024, so they start on the 22nd of November. Interesting hearing Pat Cummins today talking about the importance of all-rounders in the top 6 and sort of hinting that Cam Green's going to bowl a lot against India. Remember 4 years ago when India were in town, Cam Green was managed. He was like this vehicle you'd only take out of the shed on a special Sunday to drive for an hour and drive back again. He'd get 8 overs in an innings. He was on bowling management plans and whatever else. Now he's just another bare bum in the shower as far as being a fast bowler is concerned. And that's good. That sort of shows they feel comfortable enough in Green's body that he's not going to break down or anything like that. But remember, last year Green didn't play in the first series of the summer against Pakistan. He was overlooked in favour of Mitch Marsh when he was in the all-rounder spot. He got brought in as the number 4, the reshuffle they did post-Warner's retirement, where Smith went to open. But there's a bit of chat this week from Usman Khawaja, who opens with Smith, saying that he'd prefer Smith batted 4. Now, I just ponder whether we might be heading towards a situation where Smith does go back to number 4, where he has been prolific, with the exception of with the exception of the 12 months before he was promoted. That wouldn't be fair either. He did make 100 in the World Test Championship final and won at Lord's in the first innings of a Test win last June. But anyway, generally speaking, you could say that he'd had more productive times in his career. And it's an easy fix when they go to Asia, because we know in Sri Lanka in January, late January, early February, we know that Travis Head will open there. That when we were there in India 18 months ago, Daniel, that's what they did with Head then, and it worked, and they'll do that again, and that'll give them space for Glenn Maxwell possibly, or other configurations down the bottom of the list or down the lower middle order. But in Australia, against India's outstanding fast bowlers, they've got a call to make. If it's not Smith, we're back to a similar conversation to last year. Is it Labuschagne? Is it Green? Who is technically correct. He did make that unbeaten 174 at Christchurch. No, Wellington, wasn't it? Wellington, where he batted at 4 and got Australia to a really good place when they were in a really bad place, which was a series-defining hand. There's no doubt Green's in the 11, but yeah, I just wonder. I doubt Usman Khawaja would be saying that out of context. And yeah, Pat talking about the importance of their all-rounders, but especially Green, bowling a lot this year. He was blessed with 3 frontline quicks plus Nathan Lyon, who played all 7 Test matches last summer. Remarkable that Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins and Lyon played all 7, the 5 in Australia and the 2 in New Zealand. It's improbable they'll all play around again. Like, not getting injured for that stretch of time is freakish with older fast bowlers with a 3 in front of their age. And Lyon as well, who had that calf injury the previous year. But yeah, interesting that we have this situation coming again, this conversation seemingly going again around where Stephen Smith might fit for what might be, I suppose, the last few years of his career.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he is an epochal, a kind of generational talent, and I would be putting him at 4 in much the same way that England have protected Joe Root by letting him bat where he wants to bat, even though he would have solved a problem at 3, he would solve a problem opening, and he has batted in both those positions before. But ultimately, you say to yourself, the person who can impact the most, and it's not normal for a batter to impact, outside people like Bradman.
Mm.
It's the bowlers who have the most impact, and it's batters who have more or less consistency, and that's what makes us decide that they're great or not. But Smith is somebody who can have impact because of the sheer quantity of time he can bat and absolutely destroy the opposition bowlers. So I would want to protect him, or at least maximise his ability to do that by having him at 4. And Australia have got a precedent for this because they did put Watto up to open for a
They
while
did.
when he was
Yeah.
there, kind of big, burly, slightly wet-eyed, really gentle-seeming, lovely guy, all-rounder, which is what Cam Green also is to me. That's how I index him. I index that sort of nice-faced, he's not kind of snarly, seam bowling, batting all-rounder. The only caveat I'd have with that is that I think Green might be brilliant, but I also think that he does struggle when things don't go quite right, as they didn't, for example, in the Ashes last year in England. And so there is a certain delicacy to him, which I think comes from his age as much as anything else. I mean, we must remember he's a very young man being asked to do incredibly difficult things. And so, Watto didn't go up to open until he'd been around the side really quite a long time. I don't think, not regularly. And so
Well,
to
he
put
first
Green
went
in
to
there,
open full time. Yeah, he had a couple of different goes at it, didn't he, Watto? But the one that stands out is the 2009 Ashes, which was over 4 years after his Test debut.
right? So whether you're in danger of putting a lot of pressure on a guy who could do with sort of, I'm not saying hide at 6, but if you bat at 6 in Australia on some of those pitches, you can often find yourself coming in at very good moments, especially with Australia's bowling attack. And that's quite a comfortable place to bat when you're young. As you say, opening against Jasprit Bumrah and Mohammad Siraj and Mohammad Shami, that is a very different order.
Which makes me think that maybe they do go back to the Labuschagne idea, which got jettisoned last year. But anyway, it's all ahead of them. But I'm just kind of putting 2 and 2 together a bit here with the conversations during the week. Just on Cummins himself, he's going to use the Shield as his preparing ground for the Border Gavaskar series. He hasn't played a Shield game since early 2021 because ordinarily there's not room for it, right? He's a 3 format player. Often there's a limited overs series. He said he might even use the domestic 50 over tournament, which is starting in late September to play a few games there. Possibly some one days against Pakistan as well. He hasn't quite worked it out, but it's quite interesting, like hearing him talk about the way a modern fast bowler is prepared, right? So he was playing in the MLC as recently as a fortnight ago and earning heaps of money for it, and that's fine, whatever, no big deal. But now he's in, like, you've got bowling time and very much non-bowling time. He's not going to touch a ball for 2 months. He's going to spend time in the gym with strength and conditioning coaches combined with rest from actually not doing the bowling bit to prepare to bowl a lot in a block where he won't get to do quite so much strength and conditioning and certainly won't get a chance to rest. So that's why he's not going to be in England. But it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? Mitchell Starc will play the one days but not the T20s in England and Scotland. Hazelwood's going to play all of it. And I suppose the view there is that Hazelwood needs more bowling than the others at this point of his career or whatever it is. There's also a couple of 3 and 4 day games where India A play Australia A, one at Mackay and one at Melbourne, which they could slot one or multiple members of the Test team into. And really only Cummins is the bowler they need to get through all 7, because when they go to Sri Lanka, I can definitely see a scenario where Cummins is the one out fast bowler with Cameron Green, right?
Yeah.
Where Cummins and Green, they did that in India last year. They didn't do it in Sri Lanka in 2022, although they nearly did. They nearly played Maxwell at 8 in that second Test match. But if they did go Cummins Green, then they've got so much flexibility with what they do. They could theoretically play 3 specialist spinners and Maxwell in an extreme example to give themselves the most number of options. And we heard from Adam Zampa a couple of weeks saying that he wants to be in consideration for that trip as well as the leg spinner. So, yeah, and the other thing to note is that these back-to-back series for Australia have really significant World Test Championship implications that, they'll have 7 Test matches in a hurry. And if they can I suppose, better than break even. Their percentage, if you like, is already in the 60s. If they say won 4 of the 7, that'd be, I would say that would guarantee them a berth in the final again. And it would probably mean they've beaten India for the first time in ages. So, yeah, it's a big, big summer for Australian cricket.
It's absolutely massive. And the template for Cummins was sort of almost set by Jimmy Anderson, wasn't it? Because he had a very similar approach to bowling. Once he absented himself from white ball cricket, it then became about, fitness in between bouts of not bowling at all, and then picking up a ball and bowling, practicing, playing sometimes a couple of games for Lancashire in England's early part of their season, which would be the same sort of template for Cummins if he's playing the Shield. And it makes complete sense, doesn't it? It's worked to make Jimmy's career go on till he was 42. Cummins is a more robust character. I'm not saying he's any fitter or less fit or more fit, but he's a slightly different physique. But he's also a guy who, since having bad injuries when he first started, has actually had a pretty good injury record. Those seasons have generally had a ridiculously good record, and they tend to come together in series that really matter as well, don't they? They play against England quite a lot as a trio. It was a foursome, including Lyon and India, getting ready for India. And I know we wish it wasn't like this, but those are the series that England, India, and Australia are most fierce about.
I think Cummins had to wait 2,100 days between his first test and his second test, and since then he's missed like 3 or something like that. He's been very resilient when it comes to injury. Spencer Johnson, this is not a huge story in the grand scheme of things, but it demonstrates the risk of prioritising short-form cricket, and it's not a problem. I'm not judging Spencer Johnson here, but he picked up a side strain playing for the Invincibles in the 100. He was going to get the chance when Stark wasn't playing, and now he doesn't. It's just that, there's always these trade-offs for fast bowlers more than batters who play in short-form cricket, that there is a greater probability of them breaking down, as we know, over the years. And now it's Sean Abbott who will be the beneficiary of that spot when Australia are in Scotland and England in a few weeks, as we mentioned before. No perfect answer, but is kind of the way it is. One more thing on Aussies abroad, Daniel, before we move on. There's this Cayman Islands T20 thing going, or T10 tournament. I'm not sure. Is this the 60? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't really know what it is anymore. But like David Warner's playing in it. Good on him. He was facing Ben Menenti this morning, Bo Webster, Joe Burns, AJ Ty, who was in the Canada comp last week. They were pitching AJ Ty to me, as a prospective interview from the Canada comp. Chris Lynn, Peter Hasseglu, who plays in the Big Bash. Josh Brown, who did well in the Big Bash in the finals last year, I'm pretty sure. Also, I saw playing a bloke called Cam Hemp. Now, I've played under Cam Hemp's captaincy a couple of weeks ago. In that you and I were at, Daniel. We were there together doing the C6 six-a-side comp at Wormsley. And you were getting stuck into Cam about his mullet and all the rest of it when he was captaining the team that I was playing in for the minor counties, which was not because I'm a minor counties player, but because they needed an extra player and I was there commentating, and one thing led to another, and had a great day. But he's gone from playing at High Wycombe, where I first met him earlier this year, where he's proing. His dad played a lot of cricket for Glamorgan in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. So he's got this lineage in the UK. And I suppose that's why he's living here, proing and playing minor counties and all the rest of it. Very much an Australian, though. He speaks with a broad Melbourne accent, plays for Paran in district cricket, but now playing in a T20 in the Cayman Islands, and took a great catch last night that was doing the rounds on Instagram and all the rest of it. What a great opportunity for someone who's not a pro necessarily, but getting to play in this most unusual tournament.
I'm amazed you haven't thrown your hat into the ring. To be honest,
available.
Because I mean, I love it. Really, T10 is daft beyond belief. The fact that they can set one up in the Cayman Islands, and it's perfect for a bunch of Aussie cricketers, isn't it? I mean, it's in August. What else are you doing in August? I mean, it's sort of like it's the February equivalent in England. You can totally get it, and what's the impact? If you break down bowling 2 overs, then you're really unlucky. Really, aren't you? And it lacks consequence, but it's in a beautiful part of the world with a whole bunch of people that you know pretty well. It's an exhibition, isn't it? Really, but
it's the modern age, is what it is. Daniel, we're going to go to one more break, and then we're going to do a lightning round in segment 2. So I'm aware you've got other commitments, and I've got to play cricket in about 100 minutes. Funny that. Before we go to the break, NordVPN, this is the time of year where a lot of cricket journalists take summer holidays when the 100's on. Some of them go away in October. You're more an autumn, spring kind of holiday guy, Daniel. You tend to go away in May or October or something like that. When you do, you're going to need your programs. mate. You're going to need your Antiques
Yeah.
Roadshow and your Midsummer Murders and all the other things that you watch with Catherine. You can't go without them when you're on your holiday. You're going to need to get a NordVPN. And the beauty of doing it through us is you get a big discount, 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't fancy it, and you will because it's fucking brilliant. The one I used, the NordVPN account I was using, well, it's like there's multiple. My NordVPN account allowed me to watch every bit of the Olympic Games on Eurosport and the BBC from Spain. And that was an absolute joy watching and I would have enjoyed it in Spain as well, I'm sure, but I don't speak Spanish, right? So this was helpful. NordVPN.com/TFW. Discount, money back guarantee. It's fucking good. It's quick. It works. I've had heaps of these VPNs. Most of them are shit. Or they work for 5 minutes and they get worked out or whatever. Nord there's a reason why, basically, you know why there's a reason why everyone uses NordVPN? Because it's the best in the world. And it costs fuck all compared to, the amount of money of buying new subscriptions and all that jazz. I think people should do it. NordVPN.com/TFW. And we're going to get you one. We'll line you up before you go on your holiday.
Do please, because I really, really need it. And I saw, weirdly enough, but I didn't know whether to reply to it or not, a lot of messages to a tweet that was sent out when test matches come on. Test match specials producer sends out a tweet, says whoever was on it, and you frequently get replies saying, how can I listen to it abroad on YouTube? None of my VPNs work. Well, that's the answer then, isn't it?
Nord.
I mean, I don't know whether I should reply to a BBC tweet, though, and say you can get it using NordVPN, but I shall be doing that.
I remember Aggers used to do it when Aggers was on that platform. He used to always tell people, if you're living in a different country, jump on a VPN. And one more bit of housekeeping before we go to this break. Our live shows, we're doing the full national tour. Final Word on stage. We usually do Melbourne. We usually do Adelaide. We've sometimes done Sydney. This time around, every test match shitty this year is catered for. 21st of November at the Rosemont in Perth. That is the night before the test match. 29th of November, the Friday night, that's the big one. 600-seater, Capitol Theatre. We've never been so bold and ambitious to have a crack at something like that before, but given we sold out the corner in about half an hour, we thought it was worth having a crack. So Capitol Theatre, these will be great guests. I promise you, they'll be great guests. The Rhino Room in Adelaide, 2 nights before the test match, maybe the night before, I can't remember. That's on the 5th of December. The 12th of December in Brisbane at the Bright Side. And we're back at the Comedy Store in Sydney where we were last year or earlier this year on the 7th of Jan, which is day 5 of the test match. All of those tickets are online. It could not be easier. Our link tree, which is in the show notes, click that. You're there in like 2 minutes, not even. You're within 2 clicks would be a better way of explaining it. If you're a patron, mentioned before, joining Patreon gets you the ability to support the show and keep it independent. It also gets you a discount on these tickets, and I can send you the code, or one of us will send you the code as soon as you join. It's a very straightforward thing to do. Live shows coming your way in Australia through the course of the Border Gavaskar Trophy Series. Right, break from us. Then we're back for a trip around the world and domestic cricket as well. And we're going to do it all in, about 15 minutes. Wait for that.